Strange Brew Podcast, Season 1, Episode 356. We got a lot to go over today, so let's waste some time on the intro. We could just get right into it, but why? We have a mailbag episode. As we teased for a couple of weeks, it'll be our second mailbag episode. I've got, how many questions do I have? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, and then I got a seventh yesterday we might go over. I've got one Brewer question, I've got 3 Packer questions, and then I've got a question about the pod and a question about running, which I don't know that we've talked about the pod a ton. Maybe we did when I did the half marathon in Madison, but I am a runner, I guess you'd say, and I'm getting set for my first ever marathon in 6 weeks. And I have a question from somebody who's going to try to get into or would like to start to run, and had a question about that. So we will get to that, kind of a lifestyle question. And then the other stuff we've got to go over, just what happened during the week. Brewers won another series. They are 5-1 to begin the year. They were 2-4 last year before they won 97 games. Got the series win against the Rays. We have to talk about 2 things, and one kind of connects to the Brewer email question. Cooper Pratt, 21-year-old shortstop prospect, signed an 8-year, $51 million deal with the Brewers on Monday or Tuesday. Now, I figured they would try to do some of these kinds of deals with their prospects, and they've got the number 1 farm system in baseball, but I don't know that I thought that Cooper Pratt would be the first one they did this with. We'll talk about that. We're going to talk about CB Bucknor. What a week for CB Bucknor. Just awful. Awful umpiring on Tuesday. Then he got smoked with a foul tip right in the beak on Wednesday, probably concussed, and left that game and did not return when he was behind home plate the following day. We will discuss a little bit of the Bucks just because a nice moment earlier in the week with Alex Antetokounmpo, the third Antetokounmpo brother that has played for the Bucks, 24-year-old, because they're so shorthanded and injured and they're out of the running anyway. He made his NBA debut. That was a pretty cool moment on Tuesday. And then on Wednesday, they rested everybody, but all the young Bucks had a really good game on Wednesday, and they pushed Kevin Durant and a 50-win Rockets team to the brink on Wednesday. We'll go over that a little bit as well, and we need to talk about Matt LaFleur and Brian Gutekunst at the annual league meeting on Monday and Tuesday. Both spoke to the media. The next time Matt LaFleur makes me feel better about the state of the team when he does a press conference will be the first time in a long time. I like Matt LaFleur. I think still I have no problem with the contract extension. It felt like the most likely direction they were going to go the entire time. But when he talks about what's going on with the team, it doesn't make me feel better, and that happened again on Monday. We'll go over that too. Let's go.
On the ground, a chance here. Durham to Hardy to first. He ties! Yes! The Brewers win! Yes!
Here comes Melvin to the 25, to the 20, Gordon 15, 10, 5, touchdown! Wisconsin! Record-breaking run!
Morgan a smash up the middle, base hit to center. Here comes Gomez around third. A throw and the Brewers win!
Here's the snap. He looks, he throws, it's complete interception. And there is your Super Bowl dagger.
Booker the drive, gets inside, leans in, knocked away and stolen by Holiday. Phoenix has to foul. Antetokounmpo throws it down.
Swinging fly ball in the right center. Broxton is there. And they're the champions. They have done it.
It's been a 50-year journey. Wisconsin, we've got a room at the top of the world tonight. The Milwaukee Bucks are NBA champions.
Yeah, welcome in Friday morning before Easter. It is Good Friday. It is a weird day when you do a morning radio show. And you know, a lot of folks out there, a lot of our listeners, the country audience, they are very locked in to Holy Week, the Lenten season, and Good Friday. And Good Friday, I was born and raised Catholic and went to St. Dominic's in Sheboygan in Holy Name. And it is a solemn day. It is a very solemn, reverent, quiet, be with your thoughts, go to a 2-hour mass and the Stations of the Cross and all that stuff. It is a sad day. It's a solemn day. But then also, you're on the morning show on Friday, and not everybody is into that or cares about that, and it's a Friday heading into a weekend. So we always try to bring this really upbeat energy. It's Friday. What did we say last week? Who's ready to laugh? It's Friday. It's the weekend. We're getting to spring. Baseball is back. The Brewers are in first place. Final Four weekend. A lot of stuff going on, but then I just can't help but shake. It's the Catholic guilt. Catholic guilt is a real thing. And I just can't shake that feeling in the pit of my stomach, the way that I felt as a kid growing up on Good Friday, that you're just supposed to have this very quiet, solemn kind of sad day in a way. So it's weird to strike that balance. It's like if Good Friday were a movie. What's a depressing movie but a good movie? It's one of those, like Garden State. If Garden State were a day, Good Friday might be it. Manchester by the Sea. If Manchester by the Sea were a day on the calendar, Good Friday might be it. What are some other good depressing movies like that? What's the one in the late 90s? It's one of the saddest movies. What Dreams May Come? I think that's the name of it. That's one that's on that list too. We could maybe do, if you have any ideas on the email, strangebrewpod@aol.com if you have any movies where when you watch this movie it kind of fits the vibe of a Good Friday. I think those three are on the short list. Manchester by the Sea. I remember I watched that movie. My wife and I don't watch a ton of movies. So it won, the Academy Award, or Casey Affleck, I think, won Best Actor that year, maybe for Manchester by the Sea. None of that might be true. And I thought to myself, she didn't want to watch it. I asked her if she wanted to. She didn't want to watch it. So I just watched it one day when I got home from work kind of early and had lunch. And it was the most depressing movie I think I've ever seen. It was just 2 hours of straight depression. Okay, well, I guess I'm going to go take a nap, try to shake this off, and come back for the second half of the day. But it is always, for me, just because of my background and my upbringing, it's always a weird day to strike that balance on a Friday morning show of trying to be reverent for that part of the audience that understands what Good Friday is all about, and then also just getting excited for the weekend and having it be a high-tempo, high-energy Friday morning show. But welcome in. It is Good Friday. It is Easter weekend. How far along is Artemis 2, by the way? Did you watch that on whatever day that was? Thursday? Was that Thursday or Wednesday? They did the big launch for Artemis 2. We're going back to the moon, or for the first time, maybe? That is one thing I did see with this launch of Artemis 2. I guess it's going around the moon. We're not landing on the moon. I guess if you're near it, why not just land on it? But maybe there's probably some technical details there that need to be hashed out beforehand. Not like you can just stop off like it's a quick trip. Like you can just stop off at the moon and then get back off the moon and continue on your journey. Feels like if we're going out there, though, why not just stop on the moon? But it did lead to, that whole thing led to a lot of the moon truthers. The moon conspiracy theorists were out in force on Tuesday and Wednesday. I think they're in space for 10 days, right? So they launched on Wednesday, which would have been, I texted my buddies, it was April 1st, April Fool's Day on Wednesday. And that would have been because they've been teasing this now since 2023, that they are going back to the moon. We're going to run around the moon. We had to have the big announcement when they got the 4 astronauts and all that kind of stuff. So this would have been a 3-year-long prank, which, as I talked about on the morning show on Wednesday, we had a little fun with it on Wednesday. You've always got to be on guard on April Fool's Day when you're on social media, when you're listening to a radio station, when you're watching things on TV. You never know what's going to be true. As I said on the morning show on Wednesday, you should always approach things on social media with a healthy amount of skepticism, everything, but especially on April Fool's Day. I saw a lot of the sports world. I saw pranks about Aaron Rodgers signed with the Packers again on a 1-year, $10 million deal. Waka waka. And all that stuff was making the rounds. But you have to approach social media always, but especially on April 1st, as if nothing that you see is true. There's no validity to any of it. But as I talked about on Wednesday, some of the best April Fool's Day pranks are ones where you have a build-up leading up to it. So you go 2-3 weeks in advance. You're talking about, I've got an announcement coming up on 3 weeks from Wednesday. So if you're not specific about the date and you're building up to it 2 or 3 weeks in advance, it kind of lowers the defenses of your audience. Like if we teased, I remember one year we did one right on April Fool's Day where I teased that we were doing a big announcement about the direction of the station, and there's a big thing coming up on whatever day it was of the week that year. And then we did one where we tried to tease that we were changing formats, that we weren't going to be a country station anymore. Midwest Communications didn't want to invest in country anymore, so we're shifting to an oldies station. I think that's what we did. And it worked because we had teased for days and days and days leading up to it. So people are just looking to the announcement and the day, and they're not thinking of the date on the calendar. And then it turned out where we got a lot of texts that morning that we're excited for, so that one kind of backfired on me. That happens too. I think the curd burger at Culver's was like that too, where they did an April Fool's Day prank acting like, oh, we're going to put a giant cheese curd on a cheeseburger. Ha, ha, ha. And then everybody said, no, we want that. We want a giant cheese curd on the burger. So you should go ahead and make that happen. And they did. But I did laugh. We had a bunch of texters that said, oh, yes, I'm excited for this change to oldies. Thank God. And a new show host, too, maybe? Do we have a new morning show host to go with it? No? Okay. But that was funny that some people were very into it. But that one is better because you are leading into it. So imagine that times a billion, where we teased an announcement 4 or 5 days in advance. This is going back to 2023. Like, I think on our show prep this morning, this day in history, 2023, is when they announced the astronauts that were going to be on Artemis. So imagine a 3-year run-up. You've got thousands and thousands of people on site that day. You've got every network TV show showing the launch. You've got Hulu on it. Every streaming service is interrupting everything. NASA launched their own streaming service, I think. Literally, I think it's called NASA Plus. Badgers, Iowa will be on NASA Plus at 10 o'clock in the morning on Saturday, September 26th. But they had their own streaming format, and that might happen. And then imagine if they did all of that. 3 years of buildup. Oh, my God, we're going back to the moon. All the announcements leading up to it, and then they give you a Spaceballs, fooled you, when you get to the actual liftoff on Wednesday. That would have been an all-timer, a Hall of Fame. I don't think anything would have topped that. But I think they're on day 3 then of a 10-day mission where they're going to do a drive-by. They're going to do a whip around the dark side of the moon, the Pink Floyd, and come back. And I think it's a 10-day mission. Did you see, by the way, their toilet broke less than 10 hours into the mission? I thought that was an April Fool's prank as well, but it was not. They have one functioning toilet. That was my other question of, I figured there's got to be at least 2 bathrooms, right? On a spaceship? There's got to be 2. You have to have 2. I don't know that you need his and her sinks, but you've got to have 2 toilets, right, for 4 people? But there's only 1 toilet. And I guess it malfunctioned within hours of blastoff. And as I said in our group chat that I've got here, this sounds worse than Apollo 13. Maybe this is what they had to do to fix the toilet, which they did fix.
People, listen up. People upstairs handed us this one, and we got to come through. We got to find a way to make this fit into the hole for this.
That's what you said.
Using nothing but that. Let's get it organized. Okay.
But they did. They fixed the toilet. What a catastrophe. On takeoff. Who was the one that noticed that, by the way? I'm going to go hit the head here for a second. Uh-oh. This is bad. Turn around. Let's go home. If we can't fix this toilet, we are going home. But that's going on. That was a big story here this week as well. Okay, so now we've wasted a ton of time, and we've got a lot of things to get to. So we have all the mail stuff we'll do on the second half, I guess you'd say, of the pod. Let's start with the Brewers, and this is a topic, the Cooper Pratt story. We'll talk about the series. There's not a ton to go over. Brewers won a series. They had a fantastic homestand to begin the regular season. But one of the biggest stories of the week, which I did not see coming, is that they signed one of their top prospects, Cooper Pratt, 21-year-old shortstop prospect, to an 8-year, $51 million deal. Now, I'm just going to blaze through this. I think we've talked about this a lot as it relates to the economics of Major League Baseball. But when you're a small market team, the Brewers were actually one of the first teams to do this kind of a deal. They did it with Ryan Braun back in the day. And I remember when they did it with Ryan Braun, I thought, wow, I've never heard of this. They signed him to an 8-year, $45 million deal when he was in year 2. So the system in baseball, which may change, and there may be a strike at the end of this year. There probably will be a strike. But as it sits right now, when you call a player up to your team, you control them for 6 or 7 years, generally 7 years. Normally it gets manipulated where it's 7 years, not 6. But you control them. They are under team control for 6 or 7 years. And the first 3-ish years, they have built-in salary. So you get $500,000 year 1. You get $750K year 2. You get $1 million year 3. And then after that, depending on your performance, that's when you can negotiate. And that's how we end up with sometimes arbitration trials where one player submits for $5 million, the team submits for $3 million, and they can't come to terms. So then you literally go to a trial to determine which side is going to be the one that you have to pay. But that's how it works. It's 6 or 7 years of control, 3 years of built-in low salary, and then you can negotiate beyond that. But small market teams, if you have a really good young player, and they're good all the way through the early part of that, then once you get to year 6 or 7, and we've seen this with the Brewers, we just did it with Freddie Peralta, we did it with Corbin Burns entering the last year of his deal. When you get to the last year of that deal, if you as a small market team are not going to be able to sign that player to a massive contract, you need to determine whether you're just going to let that player go to free agency and get nothing for them, or are you going to trade them before that final year or the final 2 years of the deal and get something back for them, replenish the farm system, and then keep on going from there. But that's how it works. But you're seeing a lot of teams now do what the Brewers did with Brawny back in whatever year that was, 2009? And then they did it again with Jackson Chourio 3 years ago. That was the first time I think they had given a contract that big for a player that had not even been at the major league level. They gave Chourio an 8-year, $81 million deal before he had even seen a pitch at the major league level. Now, that got dwarfed yesterday, which we'll talk about here in a second. That was the record. The Chourio deal was the record amount of money for a player that had never seen a second of major league action. 8 years, $81 million. And the Pirates went way over the top on that. But this is a way for small market teams to hang on to young talent longer. So you sign him to an 8-year deal like Chourio and like Cooper Pratt this week, or a 9-year deal. So then they're under team control for 8 or 9 years, not 6 or 7. And you don't have to make that choice then on whether you have to trade them until later on in their career. And for the player, well, why would the player sign that? Well, they're going to get a lot more money than they would have in year one when they were going to make $500K. Now they're probably making $2 or $3 million year one. Now they're probably making $5 million year two instead of $750K. So you get financial security and you get the big-ish contract if you're the player that you would not have otherwise gotten. And if you're the Brewers, you buy them out of a couple of years on the back end and you keep them longer. This is something a lot of small market teams are going to do. And I don't think the Brewers are done with this, by the way, this year. I think there's more of this that's on the way this year. I hope there's more of this that's on the way this year. And they did it with Chourio. They did it with Braun. They did it with Freddie. They gave Freddie a 5 or 6 year, $25 million deal when he was in year 2 or 3, and that we just came to the end of that. He's in the final year of that. They did it with Aaron Ashby. They gave him a 5-year, $18 million deal that bought him out of a year or two of free agency, and he's been really good out of the bullpen the last 3 years. So this is a method for teams, small market teams, to keep their talent longer and not have teams like the Mets or the Yankees or the Dodgers poach them. Now, when you look at this Brewer farm system, it is loaded. They have the number one farm system in baseball. Hang the pennant. Number one farm system in baseball. Put it next to the wild card 2020 pennant, which I wish they would take down. But they have the number one farm system in baseball. And they have a lot, a bumper crop, as they would say, a bumper crop of really high-end middle infielders, shortstops, and second basemen. They have the number 2 or 3 prospect in all of baseball, Jesus Madej, which is how you say his name. At first, we thought it was Jesus Made, because his last name is literally Jesus. Don't mess with Jesus. And his last name is Made. When I first read an article about him 2 years ago, I thought, this kid's name is Jesus Made. Holy hell. This guy's going to be gold. And then we found out it was Jesus Made, we thought. And then it turned out, we found out this spring we were putting the wrong emphasis on the incorrect syllable. And it's Jesus Madej. He is a shortstop or a second baseman, but he's a shortstop. And he is 18 years old, and he is just about major league ready. Like, if we saw him early next year, I don't think we're going to see him this year, but if we saw him early next year, he tore up spring training. He is sounding like a once-in-a-lifetime prospect. Like, we just got done with Jackson Chourio being this insanely talented prospect. It sounds like Jesus Madej is considered to be even a notch above that. He is the number 2 or number 3 prospect in all of baseball. They've got Luis Pena, who is a shortstop second baseman, who is the number 22 prospect in all of baseball. And then they've got Cooper Pratt, the number 65 prospect in all of baseball and a top 5 prospect in the Brewer system. And they give Cooper Pratt on Monday an 8-year, $51 million deal. So not quite at that Chourio level, 8 years, 80. But I thought if they were going to do this with somebody, I thought, obviously, Jesus Madej would be the guy, or Luis Pena would be the guy, or any number of these big-name prospects coming up. I'm very aware of who Cooper Pratt is. He was in the Futures game in 2024, 6th-round pick in 2023. He is a giant as a shortstop, by the way, 6'4" as a shortstop. You don't see that a lot. And they've loved his defense basically since the minute they drafted him. He is already a Major League Baseball caliber shortstop. He played in AA last year. He's at AAA this year. This week is his first week at the AAA level. And this surprised me. The contract surprised me in a couple of ways. Number one, like I just said, I thought if they were going to do this for their next prospect, I thought it would be Madej. Based on what the Pirates just gave Connor Griffin, I would think, I guess Madej would cost you upwards of $150 million before he even sees the field. The Pirates just signed one of their number 1 prospects, Connor Griffin, to an 8-year, $140 million deal. I think that's what it was. Let me just check here. And this is the Pirates. So, yeah, Connor Griffin contract. So this blows Jackson Churrio's contract out of the water. Never mind. 9-year, $140 million contract. Now that starts with his debut this year. That is the new watermark. That beat Churrio by $60 million for a player that had not played a lick of Major League Baseball. So given that number and the fact that it happened 2 days after this Cooper Pratt deal, I would think Madej as the number 2 prospect in all of baseball. If Connor Griffin is getting 9 for 140, we're probably already talking about 150 to 175. It's possible that for a small market team, even though the Pirates are small market, it's possible that Jesus Madej, before he has even played an inning of Major League Baseball, has priced himself out of the Brewer market. Because I don't think they're going to do that. I don't think they're going to give a player who has never played an inning at the Major League level. I don't think the Brewers are giving him 150, 160, which is probably where he is now with that Connor Griffin deal. So I was surprised that it wasn't Madej or Pena, and it was Cooper Pratt. The other reason I am surprised is because I feel like now that you gave Cooper Pratt this deal, he's probably playing at some point this year at the Major League level, and that was not on my radar in 2026. Because this Brewer team, Joey Ortiz, is still young. Now, I know he had the offensive disaster class last year. He was miserable at the plate last year. He's been pretty good so far this year. There is no debate about Joey Ortiz as to whether or not he is an excellent defensive shortstop. In his first 2 years at that spot, well, I guess 2 years ago he was a third baseman. Last year was his first year at shortstop. He was excellent. Gold glove caliber shortstop, but really didn't have the bat. But he's very young, and Ortiz is under team control for 3 or 4 more years. You've got Bryce Terang. Now, this will be a topic here coming up during the mailbag part. You've got a gold glove, platinum glove level defender at second base who is seeing his offense explode now the last couple of years. And we do have question marks at third base. But Cooper Pratt, I did not think would play this baseball season, but if you're paying him now, even though it's maybe $3 or $4 million right out of the gate, which isn't a ton of money, it is to Mark Adnazio. That's a lot of Malibu sand. Got to steal some more Malibu sand, Mark. Malibu Mark. If he's getting paid now, it feels likely that we're going to see him at some point this year. What that means for Joey Ortiz, what that means at third base with the timeshare you have going on in the early part of the year with Luis Rengifo and with David Hamilton, I don't know. And Pat Murphy even said, I think I actually have the audio here. Pat Murphy said heading into the year, so this was not audio from after him signing the contract. This is audio of Pat Murphy talking about Cooper Pratt during Cactus League. And Murphy at the end here says, yeah, he's a really good player. It's really fun to see. I hope I'm still around when he gets called up.
And to try to describe it as well, it's much faster up here. That's not just the easy, that's an easy way to say it. There's just so much more to it. And it's kind of like maturity. You just have to.
No, maybe I didn't find the right spot.
When he gets to the big leagues.
Oh, here it is. Here it is.
Worker. Yeah. Hope I'm around when he gets to the big leagues.
Now, is Pat Murphy joking a little bit there like he tends to do? Absolutely. Is there a pancake in his pocket? 100%. But he is sort of telling the truth, I would think, and at least from my perspective, what I thought was going to happen this year and next year at shortstop, at second base, at third base, it was not on my radar that Cooper Pratt might be in those plans that early. And even though he's kind of joking, I think there's also some honesty there where Pat Murphy wasn't sure if he'd be the manager when some of these guys are coming up. I mean, Pat Murphy, like we talked about before last episode, I think, or 2 weeks or a week ago when we talked about the Ric Flair episode, the Ric Flair at the Nazis episode, he is in his mid-60s, and who knows? If some of these guys take 3 or more years of seasoning, he might not be the manager. He may not want to be a part of that part of baseball anymore. I would guess he would be, but who knows? So that's where we were at a month ago as it related to Cooper Pratt. You had the manager saying, I don't even know if I'll be around when he gets up, but he's got a lot of talent. Now that you're paying him, it does feel to me like we're going to see him at some point this year. In fact, he has not been in the AAA lineup the last 3 days. That has raised some eyebrows that maybe he's on his way up. I feel like that has more to do with if you're paying somebody $50 million, he has to go through a physical. I'm guessing he's in Milwaukee being put through his paces before he puts pen to paper on that contract. My guess is that's more what's happening, and he'll go back to AAA once that is done. But there are some Brewer fans on Twitter saying, oh, he hasn't been in the lineup now for AAA for 3 or 4 days since that contract announcement, and maybe he's going to be joining the Major League club. That was the most surprising part of that story, that I thought it would be other guys before him, And then it feels like if you're paying him, he is likely to see action this year. And I don't know how he fits into the picture this year with a team that's 5-1 to begin the year, coming off of a 97-win year, and a run to the NLCS. As bad as that was against the Dodgers, you're hoping for more of that this year and a better showing this year. You're hoping you can win a title this year. I don't know how a 21-year-old shortstop prospect fits into that picture, but I find it hard to believe he would just stay at AAA all year and make $4 or $5 million at AAA. By the way, it is the 5th richest contract in Brewer history that Cooper Pratt signed. Yelly has the richest contract. Bronny's second contract after that one we just talked about for $105 million. That's number 2. Churio is number 3. The $80 million they gave Lorenzo Cain in January of 21 is number 4, and Cooper Pratt at 51 or just short of $51 million. That is the 5th richest contract in Brewer history. That contract he signed on Monday, or is going to sign this week. Just interesting that that's the direction they went with one of those contracts, but you're going to see small market teams are going to do this more and more and more to keep their younger talent around longer so they don't have to trade them or that player doesn't get poached by a big market team with a lot of money. So that was big news. Now, the Rays series, the Brewers had, that start on Monday, yes, right? There wasn't a day off there. We had a day off yesterday. It was awful. I hate that first day off of the year. I am an advocate of, because you wait for baseball all year and we're chomping at the bit and you've got this good team and you can't wait to watch them every day. That's the thing I love about baseball the most is it's basically every day. There's something to look forward to every day. That first day off is just the worst of what the hell am I supposed to watch tonight now? That's what my wife and I did last night. What the hell are we supposed to watch tonight? And we have that game on the opening day on Thursday. Then you have the day off Friday. I think April should have no days off. Put more days off in May or June or July or whatever. Sprinkle them in. Spread those out. I want 30 straight games. And I don't even care if there's travel days in there. They can do it. You can make it to a different city. You can make that schedule work. Because we're so excited for the beginning of the year and the team is good. I want 30 days of uninterrupted baseball in the month of April. But they started the series on Monday and lost. Tough one for Trevor McGill at the end of that game. Contreras gave them a brief lead. Woodruff made his season debut. He looked good. 2 solo shots, no big deal. 5 innings, 2-run balls, 6 strikeouts. He touched 95 on a couple of fastballs. That's never going to be his MO again. I know we've gone over this. He is never going to be a guy throwing 97, 98, 99 the way he did consistently pre-shoulder injury. But it was good to see him hit 94, 95 somewhat consistently on Monday. And if you give up a couple of solo shots, no big deal. Solo shots won't kill you. 5 innings of 2-run ball. Brewers grabbed a lead, 2-1 lead on a William Contreras 2-run bomb, but then the bullpen struggled, gave up a home run to tie it. Ashby did, and then McGill in the 9th inning still tied with 2 outs and nobody on. He walked a guy. And any baseball man will tell you, any baseball person will tell you, 2 out walks will kill you. So he walks a guy, and then the next batter, 2 pitches later, rips a double to the gap. Rays took a 3-2 lead, and the Brewers could not counterpunch, and they lost, and everything was awful, and the season was over. And then they bounced back on Tuesday. And, Woodruff got the win on Tuesday. Who was pitching on Monday? Who was our starter on Monday? Was that the Harrison? Oh, that was Kyle Harrison. He was great. So Kyle Harrison came over in the Caleb Durbin deal. By the way, Caleb Durbin is getting absolutely dragged on Red Sox social media, on their sports radio call-ins. I feel bad for him. He's 0 for his first 18. And if you're the Red Sox, you gave up a lot to get that guy. You gave up Harrison, you gave up Drowan, you gave up Hamilton. And he's 0 for 18. He's playing every day. I feel bad. He'll get it figured out. But Harrison was the guy that came over in that deal. As we talked about with Harrison, number 1 prospect in the Giants system 2 years ago, and has more experience than Brandon Sproat, so we expected him to be more comfortable, and he was. 5 innings, 1 run, 8 strikeouts. And then you saw Red Sox Twitter posting that box score and saying, the guy we got is 0 for 15 or whatever he was on Monday, and now we give them Harrison, and he is out there dealing. And they already feel burned because Red Sox, that was the trade for Quinn Priester. That was the trade that brought Priester to Milwaukee. That was a Red Sox Brewers trade last year. So then they already had to watch Quinn Priester win 13 games and have a 3.5 ERA last year. Red Sox feeling pretty burned by the Brewer front office lately. So Harrison was Monday. Then Tuesday, Woodruff got the win. 6-2 win. And then on Tuesday we'll talk about the CB Bucknor boner. I have never seen anything like this in my life. So the Brewers had, at this point, they were up 4-2. and nobody's on base. Jake Bauers hits a ground ball to second base. It's bobbled, and then the throw is way wide of the base. It goes to home plate. So Bauers is safe at first base, right? Of course he's safe at first base. What could possibly have happened where he wouldn't be safe at first base? Well, CB Bucknor, who, as we talked about on the air, is pretty widely regarded as the worst umpire in Major League Baseball, and I'm sure he's a great guy. And like I said on the air and on the blog, look, I can't be a Major League umpire, so you always end up in a situation where you criticize somebody. You're always going to get texts on the text line or emails that say, well, if you're so good at it, you do it. So I admit wholeheartedly I could never be a Major League Baseball umpire. I couldn't probably even be an umpire at the college level or the high school level. T-ball I think I could handle. Some of those parents, though, get pretty rowdy at T-ball. And I could never do it. But whatever. CB Bucknor is making probably $500,000 a year or better, as he's a long time umpire. He's making plenty of money. He can handle the criticism, and that's a part of having that job. I take a lot of criticism. Anybody that works in media takes a lot of criticism, and I'm not getting paid nearly $500,000 a year. So it is pretty widely regarded that he is the worst umpire in Major League Baseball. He had 20 missed calls. This ABS review system is going to drag some of these bad umpires, especially home plate umpires, into the light because it's going to make them look foolish, this ABS, this ball strike review system. So before that game on Tuesday, he had a game where he was the home plate umpire and he missed 20 calls, 20 ball strike calls. Crazy. So Bauers is safe at first base, but then out of nowhere, CB Bucknor, who on the replay wasn't even looking at first base.
Never did make a move towards second.
He says that Jake Bauers is out because Jake Bauers did not touch first base.
So he's safe.
Nope. Wrong, Rock.
By Williamson at second.
Bucknor did not touch first base and then was put out.
I love the confusion on the broadcast.
So the call from CB Bucknor is that Jake Bauers missed first base and then was tagged out. Not that he made a move to second base.
Right.
And was tagged out, that he flat out missed the bag. And I think that is a horrendous call. Where is CB Bucknor looking?
He's not even looking at it. Why would he even say that?
CB Bucknor was not even looking at the play.
It is so damning. I mean, the review is so damning in so many ways. Jake Bauers, when I saw this replay, I was willing to give CB Bucknor the benefit of the doubt. I really was. And we all know, when you know an umpire by name, you know him by name because he's not good. It's like Angel Hernandez. We know Angel Hernandez, Joe West. When you are able to know an umpire by name, it's probably because they're not the best umpire. Even knowing that, I thought, okay, let's give CB Bucknor the benefit of the doubt. Sometimes a player does miss the bag. Sometimes the player's toe hits the side of the bag or the front of the bag, and it's not entirely clear if they're on the bag. So before they went to replay, I was saying to myself, all right, let's see what this replay looks like. And I'm telling you, Jake Bauers is doing jumping jacks on top of the bag. He couldn't be more on the bag. His left foot is literally square in the middle on top of the bag. There is no ambiguity where his foot is. And then on top of that, on that replay, CB Bucknor is clearly looking down the line at home plate and not even staring at first base. It is wild.
Flat out missed the bag. And I think that is a horrendous call. Where is CB Bucknor looking?
He's not even looking at it. Why would he even say that?
CB Bucknor was not even looking at the play.
He stepped right on top of first base. I'm not sure what CB Bucknor's looking at there. That's ridiculous.
Well, I'm really excited for him to have the plate tomorrow.
Levering.
Call's overturned. Milwaukee retains their challenge.
And they're laughing. Jake Bauers is laughing. Murphy and Kevin Cash, the Rays manager, they're glaring at each other and laughing. Everybody's laughing in CB Bucknor's face.
It's just a waste of time reviewing that.
At least review is available so you can get it right.
Yeah, no kidding. Everybody laughing at that call.
Kevin Cash is laughing. Look at Murph. Those two guys are laughing. I can't wait to see that text chain between those two guys.
It defies logic what CB Bucknor was doing. CB Bucknor never looked at the play, and then 10 seconds after the play was over, just decided to make a call up. You know, if you're going to make that kind of a call, you better be staring daggers at first base, and you better have a little bit of leeway there where it kind of looks like maybe he didn't touch the bag. He never even looked at it and then just decided to make a call and pulled it out of his ass. I mean, he pulled it out of thin air. That's even more ridiculous than how bad the call was. He never saw it and just thought 10 seconds later, I don't think Jake Bauers touched the bag. Why would you think that? You didn't even see it. It was insane how bad that call was. And there was another bad call earlier in the game on the go-ahead RBIs by Bryce Terang, where he was ruled out at second base, and the second baseman lost the ball, didn't keep the ball in his mitt. That was almost as bad, but then CB Bucknor an inning later said, hold my beer. I just forgot about the other bad call in that game. The whole crew was pretty bad on Tuesday, and that took the cake. I've never seen anything like that. And as I said on the blog, we wrote about it on Wednesday, in a weird way, CB Bucknor kind of brought us all together, because it was one thing that the entire sports world, every major blog, every major Twitter page, everybody was talking about this horrendous call by CB Bucknor, and in a weird way, he brought us together. Here's the radio call from the Brewer Radio Network.
CB Bucknor, man, that's a bad one. That is the Homer Simpson meme when he backs back into the bush. Like, that's CB Bucknor when he sees the replay right here. I mean, Jake Bauers is laughing hysterically at first base. I mean, CB Bucknor has wasted all of our time here.
And the review lasted a long time. Like, that review should have taken a second and a half, and it lasted about a minute. And they talk about that on the radio call, too. My feeling is, the reason they did that was to at least make it look a little better. Even though we all saw with our eyes what happened, I feel like in New York, as a way to kind of help out CB Bucknor, they said, let's have a snack. Let's take 45 seconds here and at least make this appear as though something happened that we really had to investigate. One of the all-time bad calls. So the Brewers end up winning that game. Then on Wednesday, Buckner's behind the plate. Now, a sad moment on Wednesday, and I kind of felt like an asshole, because all Wednesday morning, all anybody's talking about, I'm talking about on the B Morning Show, the HBL Morning Show, the Green Bay Morning Shows, how bad CB Bucknor is, bad umpire, terrible call, one of the worst calls of all time. And then we're all joking, like Levering was, about, God, he's going to be behind home plate tomorrow calling balls and strikes, and the Miz is on the mound, and he's throwing 102 and 96-mile-an-hour sliders. He's never going to be able to figure out the strike zone. You're going to have guys tapping their heads all day for reviews. And in the second inning, a foul tip off of a 100-mile-an-hour Mizorowski fastball, it ends up going right off of CB's mask. I mean, he got hit in the beak, right in between the eyes, and he goes down immediately, and he got up and kind of walked off toward the side and eventually would get up and walk off under his own power. But you never want to see that. I mean, you never want to see a guy get smoked like that. So I spent, I would say, a good 10 minutes of airtime, all stations combined, on Wednesday, ranting and raving about how bad CB Bucknor is. Then the poor guy gets absolutely tattooed by a 100-mile-an-hour foul tip right in his mask. So he left the game, did not return. I have not read any updates. I think he's okay, but obviously got evaluated for a concussion there. Maybe he'll be better now. All right, that's it. That's the last joke. Maybe it's like the National Lampoon Christmas Vacation, kicked in the head by a mule. Eyes aren't crossed anymore. But the Brewers end up rallying in that one. Down 2-0. Miz looked good. 6 innings, 2-run ball, 7 strikeouts. Down 2-0. Terang hits his first home run of the year to tie it. And then a 6-run 8th inning, a very Brewers-y inning where the Rays had an error, and then you stole a base, and then you beat out a bunt, and just little jabs. Peck, peck, peck. What was it, woodpeckers last year? Peck, 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 peck them to death. And eventually they put 6 runs on the board. Brewers take it by an 8-2 final. So you wrap up the first homestand, 5-1 in 6 games, and you had the lead in the one game you lost. And now they hit the road after a day off on Thursday. First of 3 in Kansas City tonight. Chad Patrick on the hill. Apple TV game, by the way. It's only on Apple TV. 6:40 first pitch. Now, Brandon Sproat is scheduled to start on Saturday. It's a 3:10 Saturday, 1:10 Sunday. Harrison goes on Sunday. Robert Gasser, who was one of the top prospects. He was sort of the pitcher we were all talking about before Mizorowski, and he made his debut 2 years ago, was really good. Then he got hurt, and then he had Tommy John surgery and missed basically the whole year last year, came back at the end of last year and was okay, and has been really good in spring training and in AAA this year. Well, Gasser, kind of like Cooper Pratt, was supposed to pitch a day or two ago and did not. And there is speculation that maybe because his spring training was so good, he was one of the last guys they sent back down to AAA. And with the way Sproat looked, and I think Sproat's going to be fine. I know everybody was flying off the handle about one bad start on Sunday. He'll be fine. Once he gets comfortable, he'll be fine. But with the way that went and with the way Gasser is pitching, you do kind of wonder. And the fact that Gasser was a healthy scratch, it sounds like his last start in Nashville, maybe he's making his way to Kansas City to pitch on Saturday. I don't know. I would say Sproat, the scheduled starter on Saturday, 3:10. Kyle Harrison goes on Sunday, a 1:10 first pitch. Well, we got to move here. This is going to be the longest podcast of all time. We have Brewers, CB Pratt. The Bucks, we'll touch on this real quick, and then we'll talk about Matt LaFleur and Goody at the league meetings on Monday and Tuesday. So the Bucks split their week. They beat the Mavericks, a bad Mavericks team. Chris Middleton back in town for that Mavericks game on Wednesday. What day of the week? All my days are confused here. I think that was Tuesday. And it's one of those games where the Bucks won, but you didn't really want them to win because both Dallas and the Bucks are vying for draft position at this point. Both are eliminated from the playoffs, so you didn't really want to win it, but they did. Ryan Rollins had a good game. Ousmane Dieng had a double-double, and the Bucks won handily, 123-99. Now, that day before that game, it was announced that Doc Rivers is going into the Hall of Fame, which he deserves. He also deserves to be fired from the current job he has, but he does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. I want to be very clear. I know that announcement came on Tuesday afternoon, and a lot of Bucks fans, with the way things have gone in the Doc Rivers era in Milwaukee, were rolling their eyes. He deserves to go to the Hall of Fame for everything. And by the way, the Basketball Hall of Fame is just that. It's the Basketball Hall of Fame. It is not like the Baseball Hall of Fame where it's all major leaguers, the NFL in Canton, it's all guys that played in the NFL. The Basketball Hall of Fame, you've got college stars that couldn't hack it in the NBA that are in there. You've got college coaches, professional coaches, Harlem Globetrotters, literally. I mean, it covers a lot of bases. It is the easiest Hall of Fame, I think, to get into. But Doc, for what he has done at Marquette, where he was a great college player, he was a pretty good NBA player. I think he was an all-star once or twice. And then for his coaching career in Orlando, obviously in Boston, won a title, went back to the finals, won it in 2008, and they got within a game in 2010 of winning two, won a ton of games in LA and failed in the playoffs, won a ton of games in Philly and failed in the playoffs. I guess by this year's standard, he wasn't terrible the last 2 years for Milwaukee. They won 45 or 46 games out in the first round of the playoffs. This year has been a train wreck. But for everything before the 2 or 3 year run here in Milwaukee, he does deserve to be in the Hall of Fame. He's number 6 all time on the coaching wins list. So you knew he was going to get in, but that announcement and that post on social media was not met kindly by a lot of Bucks fans on Tuesday. But the Bucks win 123-99, a game you didn't want to win. And then I thought Wednesday's game in Houston was actually kind of entertaining. So on Tuesday, they actually played a bunch of guys. Obviously, Giannis, we have an email on that too, did not play. I don't know if he's going to come back at all. Tuesday, we did see, as I said in the teaser, the debut of his youngest brother, Alex Antetokounmpo. Alex Antetokounmpo made his NBA debut in a season that has been a poop show, top to bottom. This was kind of a cool moment.
All right, Alex's first minutes here, NBA minutes that you're witnessing here on FanDuel Sports Network. The first time in NBA history, 3 brothers signed on an active roster to the same team. And he signed a 2-way contract back in October, but this is his first taste of NBA.
Giannis and Thanasis are on the edge of their seats watching him.
Pride at the same time. A little bit of Antetokounmpo history in NBA history. Alex's first points of his career.
Yeah, he scored 3 points on free throws. That was kind of cool. You know, you're looking for any kind of silver lining here. I don't think Alex Antetokounmpo he'll probably play a handful of minutes yet this year. That might be it, especially if Giannis is gone. I think the Alex era and the Thanasis era in Milwaukee will likely be done if Giannis is done. If not, they may hang around for a while. But that was kind of cool. For all how sour this year has been in so many ways and how really the Giannis thing this year has been kind of sour as well, even though we still love Giannis, I think we all have fatigue at this point about whether or not he wants to be here, whether or not he wants to trade, whatever. But we still love him, and we love the family, and that was cool to see on Tuesday, Alex make his debut. But you actually played a handful of relevant guys on Tuesday. Rollins played. I think KPJ is out for the year now, and like I said, I don't know. Giannis maybe plays. And that will be a signal maybe as to whether or not he's done or not in Milwaukee, whether he tries to make it to one last game at home. I don't know. They play Boston at home tonight. And they didn't play anybody then on Wednesday in Houston. They had 8 active players on Wednesday in Houston, and that was down to 7. Gary Trent Jr. got hurt in the first quarter, so he was out. And they took that Rocket team to the wire. That is a Rockets team with a lot of stars. Kevin Durant, there's a lot of great players on that Rockets team. They're going to win 50 games. They're going to be a top 4 or 5 seed in the Western Conference. With the way the Bucks have looked for the majority of the last 2 weeks, I thought Houston would win that game by 30 points, and I think they thought they'd win by 30 points. I turned that game on in the second half. It was actually a pretty entertaining game. And it was entertaining because 3 really young guys had career nights. Pete Nance, who has been good on a 2-way contract, he had a career-high 23 points. Cormac Ryan, who? Cormac Ryan, not Cormac McCarthy. Cormac Ryan, he is a guy who spent some time at North Carolina in college. He spent some time, I think he was on 3 different college programs. He's 27 years old, 6'5", but he's a good shooter. And they signed him to a 2-way deal where he has been in Oshkosh most of the year. And now because of all the injuries, he has found himself with the NBA club. And he was great. He knocked down 4 threes. He had 25 points. And Ousmane Dieng on Wednesday. Holy cow. 36 points for Ousmane. And he only hit 1 3. 36 points, 10 assists, 7 rebounds. I know we've gone over this. What from this team? Whether or not Giannis is here or not, I guess let's just operate under the assumption that Giannis will be here. But whether or not Giannis is here, what off of this year's roster do you want to keep for next year? And I think I said a podcast or 2 ago, the only 2 players, everybody else is up for grabs. I know some people really love Kevin Porter Jr. I think he's fine. I think they'd be fine without him. The 2 guys that I would like to see stick around and see what they can become are 22-year-old Ousmane Dieng, who is showing us flashes basically every night now, and 23-year-old Ryan Rollins, who has been really good in his second full season in Milwaukee. He is going to be in the running for Most Improved Player of the Year. He is not going to win that award, but he's averaging 17 points, a career high. He seems to be bouncing back after he had a lull in the middle of the year. Those are the 2 guys to me. Now, I don't know. After Wednesday, I saw a lot of people that think Cormac Ryan, after 1 good game, should stick around for a while. Or Pete Nance or whatever. I think I like Pete Nance's game. I don't know that Pete Nance is a player that sees regular minutes on a playoff team or on a championship caliber team. I don't know. Maybe he does. But right now, I would say I don't know. Those are the 2 guys to me, and Ousmane Dieng put together a career performance on Wednesday in a young career, 36 points, 10 assists, and 7 rebounds. That's a guy with his size at 6'10", and his length and his ability to knock down shots, and it looks like he's got a pretty good feel for the game. They had Dieng defending Kevin Durant pretty adequately at the end of that game on Wednesday as well. That's a guy I'd like to see get more run and see what he looks like with Giannis, or even if Giannis isn't here, just see what he looks like if you give him 25 or 30 minutes a night. But the Bucks lose by 6, but they got that down to 4 points late, and Houston was feeling the pressure in that game, again, in a game they should have won going away. So you've got Boston tonight. It is a 7 o'clock tip time. Then you've got Memphis at home on Easter Sunday, and then you hit the road for a couple of games. Then the last home game is next Friday. So you've got a home game tonight, home game Easter Sunday, home game next Friday. I mentioned, I think on the Monday pod, that if Giannis plays, and I think at this point he's probably healthy enough to play a little bit, and if he's not going to give it 100%, he could probably play 20 minutes in a game. I posited on Monday that if Giannis does play in one of these games, that to me is a signal that we might be at the end of the Giannis era, because I think he's going to want to play one more game. If he feels like this is it, I think he's going to want to play one more game in front of the home crowd. We got an email, which I guess we'll do this one now. We got an email from Travis in Sheboygan about this. He said, where am I here? I've got to organize these emails better. He said, you are right. The writing is on the wall. Giannis playing any home game for the remainder of the year will have a correlation as to how Giannis sees the future going this summer. Even if it's a 50-50 shot he is traded, Giannis won't want to take the risk by not having a final full effort showing. With all the ups and downs this year, Giannis is aware a chunk of the fan base has a bad taste in their mouth regarding him and his legacy, and Giannis is trying to get that goodwill back. And then Travis went on to say, for some reason, this reminds me of Jabari Parker. Jabari knew he had the Bulls contract, a 2-year, $40 million deal. He knew he wasn't getting an offer for the Bucks, so he went out to a local park and played with a bunch of kids as a last hurrah type of celebration for what was supposed to be a cornerstone figure for us. Yeah, I think I'm in agreement with Travis. Man, Jabari Parker, I really thought when we went to, my wife and I went to many years ago, so this was probably right after they drafted Jabari, or maybe Jabari's second year in Milwaukee. And they had a party at Veterans Park, I think it was, in downtown Milwaukee. And it was a jersey reveal party. They were going back to a different look. and they had a gigantic poster hanging from one of the buildings around that park of Giannis and Jabari standing back to back, and it said whatever their catchphrase was, "Own the future," or whatever it was called. We had "Own the future" for about 20 straight years. Own the future. And I remember looking at that and thinking that Jabari was the guy. We all thought Giannis had a lot of upside. There was a lot of potential. We were seeing more and more from him. But at that juncture, whenever that was, in 15 or 16, somewhere in there, I thought Jabari was the guy. I thought he was the 1A and Giannis was the 1B. Jabari was the Batman, Giannis was Robin. Now, Jabari had some really unfortunate injuries, and he was for a while a 20-point-per-game scorer. But yeah, that did happen as Jabari was on his way out. Remember they signed Jabari to some kind of G League deal 3 years ago in the offseason, or 2 years ago, and then he hurt himself. He's been playing internationally ever since. But I do agree, like what we talked about, if Giannis, I don't think Giannis is playing tonight. I don't know. It's always a surprise when Giannis comes back, where all of a sudden out of nowhere on Twitter 2 hours before the game, he's going to be playing in the game. I would also bet Giannis wants to play. He's going to want to have a situation where him, Alex, and Thanasis are all on the floor together, the three brothers on the floor together. But if he plays either tonight, Sunday, or Friday at home, that to me is a signal that, like Travis said, that it's probably 50-50 whether or not he is coming back and signing that Supermax contract in October. And we can talk more about that down the road. I still feel like he's going to sign that contract because Giannis is a money guy. He's a loyalty guy. He's an effort guy. He's a guy who is very aware of how he is perceived. He is a guy who is very aware of his legacy and wanting to be a top 20, top 30 all-time player, which I think he kind of is on the periphery of right now. But he is also a guy that doesn't leave money on the table. He doesn't leave freebies on the table. That has been a thing with Giannis on social media his entire time in Milwaukee. I don't think he's ever going to get a 4-year, $275 million contract again. I still think he's a top 10 player worldwide. I still think he's a top 5 player worldwide if he is healthy. But it's getting to a point now in his 30s, as other guys are on the ascend, like Wemby, obviously Shai Gilgeous-Alexander. Jokic is still probably the best player in the world, in my opinion, but Wemby and Shai are right there. And Luka. I mean, we're at a point now where a few years ago, Giannis was either number 1 or number 2. I'd say he's probably number 5 or 6 now for a lot of people. And he's got some injuries, and I just don't know what appetite there is going to be to sign Giannis to a 4-year, $275 million deal at this point in his career. And for that reason, even if he doesn't love the supporting cast, and even if he feels like we're in the middle of a soft rebuild, he might sign that contract just because he's never going to get that offer again. He's going to be 32 in December. I just don't see a world where anybody's going to offer him that amount of money. And the Bucks will. I mean, the Bucks will offer him that. But the Bucks are on the floor with the Celtics tonight. So what else? Real quick, we'll go over some Packers, then it's mail time. They had the league annual meeting on Monday and Tuesday. And Matt LaFleur finally talked. Now, we talked on the Monday podcast. The LaFleur sit-down was going on while we were podcasting. My over-under estimate was 45 minutes. It wasn't even close to that. I think it was maybe 15 minutes. And they did ask him a variety of topics. And like I said a few minutes ago or an hour ago, the next time Matt LaFleur makes me feel better about the state of the franchise will be the first time in a long time. So they asked him about Rich Bisaccia, which we knew would be a question. What happened there? Did you know he wanted to step aside? And LaFleur basically said no, he was not aware. And Goody said the same thing, that it took them by surprise that Bisaccia was going to step away and kind of go off on his own and go back to the college game. Nobody saw that coming. LaFleur said he thought up until that point that Bisaccia was going to be back. And then he said that Bisaccia never even talked to him. He has not talked with Bisaccia since that moment. Bisaccia never came to Matt LaFleur, who is his direct boss, correct? I mean, I think. Bisaccia never went to LaFleur and said, hey, I'm thinking about stepping away and going back to college. I kind of think I'm done with this. That never happened. And then they asked LaFleur why he thought he stepped down, and LaFleur said, I don't know. I assume he wants to be closer to home. I assume he wants to go back to college and be closer to home. LaFleur had almost no answers there, and I thought, what? Did Rich Bisaccia pull an Irish goodbye here? Which I don't mind. As a side note, I am an advocate of an Irish goodbye. I love an Irish goodbye where you just peace out and don't tell anybody you're leaving. That kind of sounds like what happened with Bisaccia. The fact that Bisaccia never thought to go to LaFleur and have a conversation about this or tell him what he was doing, that didn't make me feel good. Then somebody asked LaFleur, what is it going to take to get this team out of being the 7th seed every year? They've been the 7th and final seed in the playoffs every year for the last 3 years. What is it going to take to get out of that? And LaFleur answered it by going out of his way to say that he felt like players on the team last year were not happy with their roles and, quote, that took a toll on the team. Okay, that also does not make me feel great about Matt LaFleur as a leader of men. Hand up. Did you put your hand up, Matty? Put your hand up. Hand up, it's on me. That didn't make me feel great. Now, obviously, if you look at some of the comments Quay Walker made during the year, at the end of the year, and in his introductory press conference in Vegas, feels like he might be one of those guys. Feels like Romeo Doubs. Feels like a lot of the guys that have gone on to other teams, maybe those are the guys that did not love their roles. I think Matthew Golden probably fits that role as well. And Goody seems to have hinted at that at times, that Golden didn't love his role, and and Goody didn't love the role that Golden had on the offense either. So that felt like something you didn't have to share. You know what I mean? If you want to appear as someone who's the captain of a ship, who's in charge, who has everybody in line, you didn't have to say that. You could have said, we need to finish games better. We need to do this better. We need to do that better. I need to be a better play caller. Put it on yourself, like you always do. There was no reason for him to go out of his way to say that. So that was a little eyebrow raising as well. Then what else? He had one other one where I thought, God, I don't love the sound of that either. I forget what it was. Goody also talked to the media, talked about Micah Parsons, and the rehab is going well, although it does sound like he's likely to miss a month of the season, which is not unexpected. I know when Micah went down, he was teasing that he'll be back in September, but that's just Micah. That's just a superstar athlete saying things or being hopeful or thinking that they can buck the trend. Even that would have been even quicker than Watson coming back, and Watson came back in record time. But he said the rehab was going good. Goody did touch on the backup quarterback spot and what they might do there with Malik on now, and he did touch on Kirk Cousins. Now, Kirk signed this contract is so dumb. It's a 5-year, $172 million deal in Las Vegas for Kirk Cousins. Now, this is one of those NFL deals. Donovan McNabb signed one of these two late in his career where everybody thought, holy hell, what is he? What? The Redskins at the time signed him for what? 5 years, $85 million? It's one of those NFL deals where really it is a 1-year, $20 million deal. But in theory, it could be a 5-year, $172 million deal. So that's off the table. But they did talk about that as a person they may be looking at for a veteran backup behind Jordan Love. So all of that was going on at the annual league meetings on Monday and Tuesday. Yeah, LaFleur, that presser did not make me feel great. He did say he was ecstatic to get the contract offer, ecstatic to be back for year 8 in Green Bay. All right, without further ado, we're going to set a record here. Let's do the mailbag episode.
You've got mail.
But you remember this. When you control the mail, you control information.
Mail time!
Mailed it.
No, but I'm talking about like mail.
Stupid junk mail.
All right, again, the email is strangebrewpod@aol.com. strangebrewpod@aol.com. We'll stick with the Packers. I've got 3 on the Packers, and I don't think these are going to take too long, but I've got 3 on the Packers. Since we were just talking about the Packers, we'll stick with that. We had an email from, I don't think we ever talked about this, from our friend Keith in Fond du Lac. We have not had a Fond du Lac. We have not had a Fond du Lac. Remember Friar Tuck's in Fond du Lac? I always remember Fond du Lac because when I had to go to Point, now I don't think you have to do this anymore. Well, maybe you do. I think you probably do. But when I had to go to Point, Highway 10 was under massive construction. Now I think you go from 23 to 41 to 10, and then 10 is basically 70% of your drive. But when I was going, 10 wasn't open, so I had to take all these roundabout ways. I had to take 23 to Fond du Lac. I had to take 41 to 21 to 73 to 39. It was a mess. But I always had to drive to Fondy, and that was at a time when Highway 23 to Fondy was not 4 lanes, 2 lanes in each direction, which was a nightmare when that was a single-lane highway each way. So you had to drive that. Then I had to drive all the way through Fond du Lac, all on Johnson Street or whatever it is. Drive all the way through the heart of Fond du Lac. There's a million lights past Friar Tuck's. But I had to pass all those lights and hop on 41. That's my knowledge of Fond du Lac. But anyway, Keith in Fond du Lac said, John, is there any reason why the Packers are so averse, good word, are so averse to doing Hard Knocks? Any insight there? So they announced this week that Hard Knocks is going to be the 2 combatants in the Super Bowl. Now, the whole thing with Hard Knocks, which obviously has changed, for many years, one of the incentives to make the playoffs is that you would not be asked to do Hard Knocks. They would not ask you to do the Hard Knocks, the HBO reality show, which has been going on now for 15 years or 10 years at least. I watch it. I used to watch it more religiously. I did watch. They were in Jets camp 3 years ago with Aaron Rodgers. I wanted to see that. I mean, there are certain ones that I am locked into for every minute. I think they did the Bills last year. And it used to be where if you made the playoffs, then you were not on the list of teams that could be featured in Hard Knocks. And for a variety of reasons, at least at that time, maybe that has changed, but not for the Packers. Teams did not want to be on Hard Knocks. As you would expect, it is probably a headache to have cameras and people getting interviewed and vignettes being done as you're in training camp, as you're trying to get guys up to speed, as you're getting set to try to get prepared for the season and the preseason. It's an added inconvenience, I would think. So for a lot of reasons, teams didn't love being the subject of Hard Knocks. If you made the playoffs, they would not put you in Hard Knocks. Now, that seems to have gone by the wayside. That seems to be a bygone era now with Hard Knocks, because the Bills were in the playoffs last year, and they were the featured team last season. And now you get the two Super Bowl teams, the Patriots and the Seahawks, are both going to be on Hard Knocks. So that seems to be out of the equation now, that if you make the playoffs, you no longer are put forth to be a team, to volunteer as tribute, to be on Hard Knocks. It has been long discussed that the Packers do not want to be on Hard Knocks. But, Keith, I got to tell you, I wish I had more insight. The reasons for that, I do not know. I mean, there is clearly stuff behind the scenes. The Packers operate like the Freemasons, like the Stonecutters. For whatever reason, what's going on in that Freemasons temple? Nobody knows. And they don't want you to know. So there must be something that happens organizationally that they do not want to shine a light on for whatever reason. I don't think anything nefarious is going on. There's no robes or spankings or things like that. I don't think there's anything like that going on. I don't think there's anything going on with money or things like that. But the Packer front office and the Packer board and the president, they have always operated somewhat in this shroud of secrecy behind the scenes. Now, Mark Murphy bucked that trend a little bit because, as we've talked about on podcasts before, I don't think Mark Murphy saw a hot mic that he did not want to talk into. And I don't think that the board loved that necessarily about Mark Murphy. We loved it for content, and he was always hilarious with the things he would say and the things that he would say where you think, oh, they probably didn't want him to say that. So he was a little more out there. But yeah, the Packers have long been on record that they do not want to do Hard Knocks. Now, why has the NFL not forced the Packers to be on Hard Knocks? Because when you think of a team from the NFL's perspective that you would want on Hard Knocks, that would jack the ratings up. I mean, there's a reason. You have to be good, but there's a reason why the Packers get 5, 6, 7 primetime games every year, and that's because ESPN, NBC, all of those networks know that degenerates like me and you, we're all going to watch, and the ratings are going to be tremendous, and then that fuels into what they can get for their next ad deal. I mean, there's a reason there's a ton of Packer national TV attention, so it would seem logical, right, that they would want them on this show, their featured off-season show. Why the NFL has not applied pressure there, and maybe they have, and why the Packers have been allowed to not do it. If I were another team, and they featured now, I feel like, almost every team. If I were another team, I'd probably be saying, why aren't the Packers being forced to do this? What is it about the Packers? I don't know if it's the fact that they don't have an owner. I mean, I'm an owner. I'm talking to you right now. I'm the owner. Ask me. But maybe that's why, because there's no owner there and there's more red tape to run through, or there's more bureaucracy maybe there that the NFL has to go through to get the approvals to be where they want to be. I have no idea. But I don't know why the NFL has not forced them to be on Hard Knocks. And at this point where it's clear that that playoff exception is no longer a thing, I am very surprised the NFL has not put the kibosh down, so to speak, not put the hammer down and said, you're going to do this, because the ratings, it would be the highest rated seasons of Hard Knocks of all time. I mean, I don't think there's any debate about that. And I'd love to see it. I'd love to see what goes on behind closed doors at 1265. Again, I don't think it's anything that's going to raise any eyebrows, but it would be fun to see how the operation works for a publicly owned team. And when you factor in, God, the features they could do on the bikes, you know, at training camp, there's so much, the Packer Hall of Fame, the renovations, there is so much content there for them. I would think HBO producers and the people in charge of that show would be just drooling to get in there. I don't know. Keith, I don't know. I don't know why the Packers are so averse to it, but they are. But that was announced this week that both the Seahawks and Patriots will be on Hard Knocks. So I wish I had a better answer for you, Keith. Thank you for texting. Thank you for emailing the show. I have no answers for you. Here's another one as it relates to the Packers and Lambeau. Anthony in Sheboygan emailed and said, John, a lot of talk about Lambeau naming rights. Is it me, or does that feel sacrilegious to put naming rights on Lambeau? Here's something I didn't know about other stadiums in the NFL. Because we always call, like, if the Chiefs have a home game, we always say they're at Arrowhead. That is what we always say. That's the vernacular. They're playing a home game at Arrowhead. I did not realize that they have a sponsor on that stadium. What is it called? Arrowhead sponsor. It's something I'd never heard of before. Is it GEHA? G-E-H-A, Government Employees Health Association. So they call it, technically it's GEHA, I think, Field at Arrowhead Stadium. But you always just say Arrowhead, and they've got the logo, the GEHA, the GEHA logo on the front. But even when you're coming into the broadcast for a Chiefs game on NBC or CBS or Fox, nobody's saying that. I did not realize that Lambeau Field, Lambeau Field, sprinkler guy at Lambeau Field, I didn't realize Lambeau and Soldier Field are the only two stadiums, soon to be in Northwest Indiana, Soldier Field, soon to be the Gare Bears. That sounds like a decision is coming there in the next few months. I cannot believe how far down the line we are with that becoming a reality. I mean, you talk about getting an absolute manna from heaven, gold from the skies in terms of trash talk for Packer fans if they move to Indiana. Those are the only two stadiums in the NFL that do not have naming rights on them, and they've been able to avoid it so far. I would agree with, what was the email again, with Anthony, that Hunky Tony. I would agree with Anthony that it does feel sacrilegious because it does feel like a religious site, doesn't it? That would be a whole other thing they could put on Hard Knocks. But it does have that feel. Lambeau has that feel, and it would feel bizarre, even though the gates have sponsors. There's the Potawatomi gate. There's a Fleet Farm gate or a Menards gate, a Gruber gate. Oh, there should be a Gruber gate. One call. You got a call to get in. One call, that's all. Could you imagine if David Gruber got the naming rights to Lambeau Field? One call, that's all. You have to get Culver's on there. Quick Trip could be on there. It does feel sacrilegious. It also feels inevitable just because you're always going to be looking for new sources of revenue, and you are always going to be in search of ways to make money and to get yourself into that realm. And that's one of the biggest opportunities there. I mean, I can't imagine how much money they would make. Miller paid $20 million for 20 years for the naming rights to Miller Park, and we still call it Miller Park. And I don't know what American Family had to pay to take over those naming rights. American Family had money to burn that summer, by the way. That was the same summer they had the naming rights then to the Marcus Amphitheater. I mean, they added a lot of stuff. Not the B93 studios. We're powered by Carbless, which is fine. That's great. I'm happy to be a part of it. Carbless could be a sponsor for Lambeau Field. But it does kind of have a Wayne's World feel to it, doesn't it?
No, I will not bow to any sponsor.
This is one of my favorite Wayne's World scenes.
I'm sorry you feel that way, but basically it's the nature of the beast. Maybe I'm wrong on this one, but for me, the beast doesn't include selling out.
Doritos.
Garth, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Slow pan up. Garth's got Reeboks on, Reebok jacket, Reebok shoes.
It's like people only do things because they get paid. And that's just really sad.
So it does sort of have that feel to it. But in those corporate offices, in those boardrooms that we're not allowed to see because Hard Knocks can't get in there, they've talked about that and they've theorized. I mean, if Miller spent $20 million for 20 years of naming rights in 2000 for Miller Park, how much money? I mean, we're talking about probably $200 million. I mean, we're talking a 20-year deal. They probably wouldn't do a 20-year deal. I would guess $200 to $250 for a 10-year deal. Maybe even more than that for the naming rights on Lambeau. I might be way lowballing that. That feels right 25 years later, but it does feel sacrilegious. I would agree. I would just say, this is the Macho Man. What's the Macho Man quote we always say? You may not like it, but accept. You may not like it, Mean Gene, but accept it. So that's the deal. At some point, it will happen. I do feel like they're trying to be the last bastion there because they have that very religious feel to them. Like we talked about Hard Knocks, they've got this very pious feel of the publicly owned small market team, the mom and pop shop that's never going to sell out. So they'll probably try to be the last team to avoid it. But at some point, whether it's 2 years down the road, 5 years down the road, that money is going to be so big. Nobody turns down money. One thing I've learned in my life, in my 41 years, nobody turns down money, especially money in that amount. And I'm also sure they've had people that have probably contacted them, Potawatomi, when they bought the naming rights to that gate, probably asked, hey, what would it cost to be the naming rights of the field? Would you even consider that? I am certain those discussions have happened. I would guess at some point we're going to get there. But it does, I agree, it does kind of feel sacrilegious to have a name. It's like having a naming right on a church. You know what I mean? It would be like having a naming right on St. Dominic Church. Another Packer-related email. I like this one. So Bob Harlan passed away. I don't know if we ever talked about that on the podcast. That was, I think what happened there is that news came during the St. Jude Radiothon. And then we had the podcast early that week, and then I was gone for a week, so it was a little too late. But I like this is coming back. Alex in Sheboygan said, where do you have Bob Harlan ranking in terms of importance in the franchise history? I think he's Mount Rushmore, no doubt about that. With Lombardi, Lambeau, and Brett Favre. That's where Alex has his Mount Rushmore in terms of importance. So this has nothing to do with performance on the field. And I guess with Favre in some ways it does. But who has the impact on the franchise staying, the franchise making money, the franchise being relevant? So where does Harlan rank on that for me? I've tossed this around. I can't get him past Lombardi. And I know it feels counterintuitive to say that he would be more important than the guy that founded the franchise. Curly Lambeau. Without Curly Lambeau, there's not a team. Without Curly Lambeau, this team does not exist. So it's hard to have the guy who founded the franchise lower than 1 on the list, but I think I would have Lambeau at 3. Lombardi is 1 to me just because when he came to Green Bay, if you ever read, there's a book called That First Year. And there's 2 actually really good NFL books. One of them, I forget the name of it, but I know we've talked about it, where it talks about the origins of the league. And it talks about in the 20s and when the franchises were coming to be. And it talks about the original owners of the Giants, the Maras and the Rooneys in charge of Pittsburgh and Burt Bell in charge of Philly and George Preston Marshall in charge of the Redskins. And who am I missing on that list? There's somebody else there. I forget who it is. Hallis with the Bears. And it talks about all the things they had to do in the first 20 or 30 years of the league when it was not a popular league in the 20s, 30s, 40s. And it was gaining some steam, but it wasn't what it is anywhere close to what it is today. Horse racing, boxing, college football, baseball obviously was king. So they were fighting upstream against a lot of things. It's interesting to read about a time in the league like that. Like I think we've talked about with the draft. Back in the day, they would do drafts, and they would be in a hotel room, and they would call the people that they drafted, and a lot of the time, the players would say, I can make more money at a factory. I can make more money. I'm going to go to the coal mine. I'm not going to play for the Eagles. Are you crazy? I'm going to the coal mine. Make a ton of money there. So it's interesting to read about the origins of the league and how the Packers kind of fit in there without having an owner. But when I think to the 50s then, and the team had been so bad, I think they had 1 championship around World War II, and then they had been so bad in the late 40s and most of the 50s, one of the worst teams in the league. And then Lombardi comes in, and the book is called That First Year. It chronicles 1959. And it just goes over, it's basically like an episode of Bar Rescue where John Taffer comes in, shut this down, you shut up, you do this, clean this up. That's what Lombardi did. I mean, Lombardi came in and instilled this attitude and culture basically from the jump. And they went 7-5 that first year. And it was such a reversal from where they had been, the way the organization was run, the way the players handled themselves, the way training camp went. He just made it a top-tier organization basically from the day he walked into the door. And walked in through the door. He didn't walk into the door. He just walked directly into the door, fell over, concussion. Then hours later, then he got things going. But from the second he took over, the whole organization had the feel of a winner again. And when you look at his coming to the franchise in 59 and how the league exploded in popularity, that era of Packer football, when NFL films came to be, and TV rights deals took off, and the AFL started in the mid-'60s. That was such a boon. That's where the NFL as we know it today, in my opinion, that's where the NFL that we know today was really born, was the late 50s, 60s, and that whole decade of the Lombardi Packers. If Lombardi doesn't come to Green Bay in 59 and turn things around for the team, and they just continue to be mired in mediocrity at best in the 60s, and as the league is exploding and TV deals are popping off and the Packers need renovations or a new stadium, I don't know that little old Green Bay survives that. I don't know that if they're winning 4 or 5 games a year in the 60s and they're not going undefeated and having guys win MVPs and Bart Starr and Horning and the offensive line and all the guys that were involved there and Lombardi leading the way in the Ice Bowl and all that stuff, if they're not good in that era, I don't know that they survive. I don't know that you survive that decade of explosion economically if you're not good, if you're not relevant, if the stadium isn't sold out, if people don't put you on TV. I don't know that the Packers survive that. Now, again, you could say, well, the Packers aren't even a thing, John. If Lambeau doesn't exist, fine. But to me, that was probably one of the biggest tipping points, and there were a lot of times, and we're going to talk about another one here in a second, there were a lot of moments where the Packers could have gone away. And that, to me, was one of the biggest because not only did they need to start winning, it just coincided with the league absolutely going nuclear and becoming the number one sport in the country in many ways. Baseball still held on to that title for a while, but that's where the train really got on the tracks for the NFL to eventually become the behemoth, the mammoth that it is now. And if they weren't good in that era, I don't think they survived. Now, Harlan, a couple of different times when once again in the 80s, 70s, and 80s, post-Lombardi, things were a disaster. There was controversy on the board. I forget who the guy was right before Harlan. A lot of Packer fans know his name. I can't think of it. It's not Lee Remy. Who was? You want to do another episode of Googling live on this podcast? Who was the president of the Packers before Harlan? He took over late 80s. Oh, Robert J. Perrins. He was a judge, I think. And he passed the torch to Harlan in 1989. But at that point, again, you had about 20 years. And again, much like in 1959, we were coming to another Renaissance era in the NFL where Fox was going to be joining in the early 90s with TV rights. We were in another era of explosion in terms of money, rights, commercials, ad deals. And the Packers, again, had been pretty bad for 2 decades. But Bob Harlan takes over. And the best thing that Bob Harlan does is he doesn't, as Michael Scott would say, micromanage. He doesn't micromanage. For the first time in many years, the team has a president. He hires Ron Wolf, a stroke of genius, a guy a lot of people wanted. And he hires Ron Wolf, and he lets Ron Wolf just do his damn job. And he doesn't meddle. And there are so many interesting stories and interviews of Ron Wolf, especially as it related to the Favre trade, Reggie White signing, all that stuff, where Wolf would go to, he'd do the proper procedure, and he would go to Harlan and say, hey, what do you think of this? What do you think of that? And inevitably, Harlan's reaction was always, I don't know. I'm a businessman. I love the Packers. I like watching the game. You know more than me. You do it. I hired you. I love a manager like that. I love a boss like that. We hired you for a reason. Sink or swim on your own. If you fail, you're out. We'll bring somebody else in. If you succeed on your own volition. I hired you for a reason. And if he doesn't do that, there is no Renaissance. There is no Favre. There's no Reggie White. There's no 96 Super Bowl. Now, I think it's fair to have a conversation about would the Packers have gone away? I don't know. At that point, they were firmly entrenched, even though they were bad. I don't know how in peril they were. If you listen to a lot of Packer historians, they'll tell you that era, and then again when they needed the stadium renovations, those were 2 big influx points where maybe they could have fallen apart. And that's the other big thing of Harlan's legacy when they needed the Lambeau renovations and they needed to come into the 21st century and they needed the Hall of Fame and all the different stuff to happen. He was the guy that walked around in the late 90s, early 2000s, literally walking around door to door, talking to people, which is the worst, talking to regular people, which, as we all know, is terrible. It's a horrible ordeal. And he did it all. He shook the hands, he hugged the babies, he did everything that he had to do to get that passed, which it didn't pass by a ton. The stadium deal where Green Bay, or whatever, what's the county? Brown County? They had to approve ultimately a sales tax? It was some kind of tax that went to the stadium. And it didn't get passed by a ton, but it did. And without that, I think it is fair to wonder, if you don't get the stadium renovations, what do the Packers look like as an organization now? A lot of people will say they would have been gone. I don't agree with that. That's just me personally. I think they last because at that point they've been around for 80 or 90 years, and there's so much history behind them. Even if the stadium were still the green stadium, which I kind of miss. I kind of miss those long shots before broadcasts of the old green stadium with the gold lettering of Lambeau Field. Even if that's still what it was, I think they're probably around. Are they in as good of a spot as they are financially in terms of the success of the league? Maybe not. But those are 2 big moments in time in Packer history, and Harlan ranks very high there. I would agree. I don't think I'd have Favre number 4, even though I understand wholeheartedly, if you don't make that trade and you don't bring in Favre and you don't get this gunslinger that kind of leads the way for this band of lovable idiots in some ways, they're not, but you know what I mean. Yeah, we loved the good old boys of Favre and Chimura and Frankie Bag of Donuts and Reggie White being the minister, and you had Santana Dotson and Leroy Butler was dancing out. We loved it all. But Favre was the ringleader there. I mean, he was the guy that led the team. So I can see a case for Favre at 4. I don't know who I'd have it for. I guess I didn't give that a ton of thought, but Favre's on the top 5 or 6 for sure. I think I do agree, though. I would go Lombardi 1, Harlan 2, Lambeau number 3. And I understand wholeheartedly if someone wants to poke a hole in that and say Lambeau has to be number 1 because without him the organization isn't even founded in 1919 and we're not even talking about Packer football. Okay, that's a fair point. I don't know that I have a return volley for that point, but it's my list. I make my list. You can make your list and we can agree to disagree. I would go Lombardi 1, Harlan 2 on my power rankings. All right, now let's talk about a quick Brewer email. And this kind of goes back to the Cooper Pratt conversation we just had, although it doesn't talk about prospects. It talks about guys that are already up. Nick in Oostburg. I just got an Oostburg bakery drop here this morning on the Good Friday morning show. We got a double stuffed coffee cake. We got a cream-filled Long John, everybody. Oostburg Bakery is one of the best. So Nick in Oostburg said, John, pick one of these 3 to give a big extension to. Bryce Terang, William Contreras, or Sal Frelick. You can take Sal Frelick right off the list. I like Sal Frelick, but he is not somebody I would give. The one thing about Frelick is I don't think he's going to cost a ton. I think what Nick is hinting at is what we talked about when we talked about, is there anybody on the team you would give the Yelly contract to? Is there anybody on the current team you would give the second Braun contract? Not the first one that we talked about earlier, but the second one that he got $105 million. It is rare, as we've been over, for the Brewers to invest long-term big money in those guys. More often than not, they either let that player walk after their team control, a la Prince Fielder, a la Willy Adames, or they trade them, a la Freddie Peralta, a la Corbin Burns and Devin Williams and guys like that. That typically is the move. It is most rare for the Brewers to actually say, okay, we're going to give this guy 6 years and $150 million or 6 years and $120 million. So Nick's question is, of those 3, Frelick I don't think is going to cost that much. Now, Frelick, he did end up hitting for some power last year. He is a Gold Glove defender. We all love Sal Frelick. I love that Sal Frelick's jersey is dirty literally every game. He steals bags. He did hit 12 home runs last year. He had only hit 5 in 2 years prior, like 5 combined. He hit 12 last year. He hit 290 last year, which was either top 10 or top 15. Might have been top 11 or 12 in the National League. He was in the conversation for a while last year for maybe a batting title. And again, he gives you tremendous defense in the outfield. Frelick, to me, Frelick has probably 4 years. I think Frelick and Terang, I want to say, are on the same timeline. So they're both under control until 2030. And you don't have to do anything at this point with Frelick, I don't think. Terang is a bigger conversation, but Frelick you probably just let go this year and next year, and you pay him what you're going to pay him, and you pay him the ARB, and then maybe in 2029 or 28, if you want to give him a 3-year, $40 million deal, I don't think he's going to cost that much, so I just take him out of the equation. So the bigger question then is Terang or Contreras. I am on record, until the Nico Horner deal the Cubs just did, I have been beating the drum of, I think Bryce Terang, and I think we've talked about on the podcast, I think Bryce Terang is one of the exception to the rule guys. He feels like that to me. This is year 4 of Bryce Terang. So Bryce Terang is under contract because he didn't get enough at-bats his rookie year. He is under team control until 2030. So you don't have to make a decision on these guys right away. But Bryce Terang has always been an incredible defender from day one, a great defender. But he was a nothing offensively, and I mean a nothing. His OPS was 550, I think, his rookie year, which is barely justifiable to be a part-time player, let alone a full-time player, but that's how good his defense was. And then in his second year in the league, the offense got better. I think he had a 650 OPS. So from 550 to 650, with the defense he was playing, and he showed a little pop in that second year, if you can have a 650 to 700 OPS with that kind of defense, with platinum-level defense, which is what he won that year, not just the Gold Glove, the Platinum Glove, the best defender in the league, I can live with that. We can all live with a 650 OPS if you're playing that kind of a defense at second base, at a premium position. Then last year, fell off a little bit defensively. Not much, though. He was basically top 5 by any metric. And then last year, he gave you this offense that we didn't see coming. He hit 18 home runs. He hit 285. His OPS was almost 800. And you just see these incremental steps forward. So with the power and with the average and with the elite defense and the fact that he's 26, I think he is. What are the ages of these guys? Bryce Turang. Sal Frelick is 25. Turang, I think, is 20. Yeah, Turang is 26. And Contreras is 28 years old. But Bryce Turang, and now what we've seen so far, now look, it's 6 games, I get it, but he has a 6-game hitting streak. He's hitting .409. He's got a home run. He's got 4 doubles. It looks like the offense is going to stay at the level that we saw last year, where he could be a guy that is going to hit you 280 and hit you 20-ish home runs and knock in 80 runs and steal 30 bags. If he's giving you that, if he's giving you, what did he hit last year, 288? He hit 288 last year, 18 home runs, 81 driven in, 25 steals, OPS of 795. If he is that, if he's a 280 to 290 guy, 15 to 20 home runs, 80 to 90 runs driven in, 30 stolen bags a year, and he's giving you that defense, and he's only 26, I would like to see what it would cost to keep him. He is my answer. William Contreras has been awesome. William Contreras only has 1 more year of team control left, and they're going to be at a crossroads with him at the end of this year. So at the end of this year, he has 1 more year next year, and that's it. And he has been an elite catching defender. He's a great framer of pitches. He has power. He's hit around 20 home runs, knocked in 80 runs. He's got a flair for the dramatic, which we saw the last couple of years. And it's hard to find cornerstone catchers. The thing I worry about with Bill, I call him Bill. The thing I worry about with William Contreras, if I'm a Brewer fan, is that he is 28. And catchers have running back lifespans. There are some exceptions. I mean, could he be the next Yadier Molina, where Yadi played for 15 years and gave you elite catching and pretty good offense for the better part of almost a decade and a half? Maybe. But that's an exception. There are a few exceptions to that rule, but in general, catchers, even if they're going great, once they hit 30, 31, 32 years old, it drops off and injuries crop up. It's just the nature of that position. I would be hesitant to give Contreras a 4 or 5 year deal in the $100 million range to buy him out of next year and to keep him around for 4 or 5 years beyond that, just because of what we see as a drop-off at catcher. It would be like giving Josh Jacobs he's about to be 29, right? It would be like if the Packers gave Josh Jacobs a 4-year, $80 million deal this offseason. I'd think, I don't know about that. I don't know. We saw a little drop-off last year already. I don't know about that. I love William Contreras. I hope he stays. I hope they find a way to keep him and have it be not an exorbitant price. But for his age and where he's at and that position, I would just be more reluctant to give him a bigger deal. Bryce Turang at 26 years old, with what he's shown us, the growth he's shown us, I would love to see him stick around. He is my answer. Now, the complicated part is the deal Nico Hoerner just signed. So prior to the Nico Hoerner deal in Chicago this year, I thought, stupidly, that they could sign Turang to a 5-year, $90-ish million deal. And that, honestly, that was not without some research. I kind of looked at comps and what other guys were getting. That felt right. A 5 or 6 year deal in the $90 to $100 million range, that would get him through the rest of arbitration, and that would buy out about 2 years after that. So you'd have him around a little beyond 2 years or 3 years even beyond where he would normally be here. But that went out the window with the signing that Nico Hoerner made in Chicago. Nico Hoerner is a pretty good comp for Bryce Turang. Nico Hoerner won the Gold Glove at second base last year. Bryce Turang is a better offensive player than Nico Hoerner. He's got more pop. I think they both kind of hit for a similar average, but that's a good comp. I would say Bryce Turang is better than Nico Hoerner, although they're both good players. So Nico Hoerner signed a 6-year, $141 million deal with the Cubs a few weeks ago. That is so far beyond where I thought you'd be for a player that age at that position who plays premium defense. So that is a starting point now for Bryce Turang. He's not going to get paid less than that. So I thought we were 5 for 90, and now Nico signs that deal. And with what Turang is doing and what Nico is doing, there isn't a chance that Bryce Turang's agent is accepting anything less than that. And you know how contracts go. The next one's got to be bigger. If you're a good player, if you're on the level of that player, the next one's going to be bigger. So we're probably now looking at 160 to 175 for Bryce Turang over 6 years. And I wonder if that Nico contract played into the contract that we saw Cooper Pratt get earlier this week. Because if you feel like now that Bryce Turang has been priced out, like you're not going to give him that contract, then it makes a lot of sense to sign Cooper Pratt, to give a contract to Madej or Pena and sign them for 6 or 7 years for 80, 90, 100 mil if Turang's going to cost you 170. And if you believe in the guys that are coming up and that they're elite defenders and they can be at some point a comparable replacement for Bryce Turang, then maybe that's why you're starting to see those deals, and you saw that deal for Pratt earlier in the week. I don't think it's a coincidence that Horner signs that deal 2 weeks ago, and then all of a sudden Cooper Pratt signs this 8-year, $51 million deal. I hope Bryce Turang is around for a long time, and like I just said, he's under team control for 3 more years beyond this one. You do not have to make a choice on Bryce Turang right now, but I think soon, I think in the next year or two, and if Pratt comes up this year or next year, which he's going to have to at this point, and if Madej comes up next year, which I think he's probably going to do, and Pena, you do wonder at what point, if Madej pans out and Luis Pena pans out and I forgot about Jet Williams. Jet Williams is another top 100 prospect they have. They just got in the Freddie Peralta deal, who I thought would make the Major League roster to begin the year as a third baseman because he was good in that spot too. That guy's also a top 75 prospect. So you've got Pena, top 20 prospect, Madej, the number 3 prospect or 2 prospect in baseball. You've got Jet Williams, a top 100 prospect. Cooper Pratt, who you just signed, is a top 65 prospect in all of baseball. So with all of those guys and options, and now you're giving out some of those contracts to younger players, I do wonder if in a year or two, not this year, probably not next year, but the year after that, in 2028, I wonder if Turang is still producing, and he's 28 years old at that point, I wonder if they explore a Bryce Turang trade. I hope not, but when I saw that Nico Horner deal, I thought, oof, I don't think Mark's paying that. I thought 5 for 90 I thought was palatable, and that keeps him here a little beyond the team control years. But 6 for 141, I don't know. If I have unlimited money for that question, my answer is Turang. A Turang over Contreras and Frelick. Now let's do 2 other quick ones here that have kind of to do with the pod, and then we have a running question I want to get to. We had an email from Brett in Sheboygan that said, John, been listening to the pod for the last couple of years. Have you ever thought of having more guest appearances on the pod? I have tossed this around once in a while. So we had, in the early days of the pod, I think we had my buddy Eddie, who works in the Fox Valley. Now he's a Bears fan. I think we had him on. We had my wife on, and she now has the most downloaded podcast in Strange Brew history. So that ego is, you can't reel it back in. That ego, she got the radio ego going again, which doesn't take much. And she does have the highest downloaded episode now in Strange Brew history. But we had her on as a vacation recap. I think we're going to have her on more, not just for that kind of stuff, but because as a PT and the injury information she gave us on Quinn Priester, when there's injuries for the Packers, Brewers, and Bucks that I don't know anything about, maybe we have her on and help her describe what it is and how long that player could be out. So we've had a few guests on in the past, but we have not done it routinely. And like I said, we're on episode, 356? We're almost in a full calendar year of episodes. I don't know if Brett is hinting that he wants more or not. Here's my feeling on guests on podcasts. The podcasts that I listen to, and I listen to the Rosillo podcast a lot. I listen to the Bill Simmons podcast. I hate listening to it a lot. I listen to Pardon My Take once in a while. When they have guests on, if I'm listening to one of the pods I normally listen to, and they intro it and say, hey, we have a guest today when they don't normally have a guest. Now, Rosillo normally has a guest. I mean, some of those pods just have them routinely, so you're used to it. When I listen to a podcast that doesn't traditionally have a guest on, and they start by saying, we have a guest today, and that's the bulk of the pod, I get a little turned off. I don't know why that is. That's just me. I'm not saying my preference is right or wrong, but that's how I feel. When I listen to a pod where you don't normally have a guest on, I'm tuning into that pod to listen to that person talk about whatever they normally talk about, and that's what I want to hear. And sometimes if they have a guest on and it's 80% of the episode, I'll just skip the episode. I'll just opt out of the episode and wait for the next one. So that's kind of how I feel, but I don't know. We can ask the tribe. Anybody else? Anybody have any opinions on that? Email them in. You want to see? I mean, we've got people. I've worked now in radio for 20 years. We've got people we could probably bring on the pod. The other difficult thing is I record at such a weird time with the morning show, and it's kind of in the middle of the day or late morning then that we actually record these episodes. So that makes it a little difficult to have guests on. And I want to be in the studio. If I'm going to have a guest on, I want them either in studio or when I'm recording in studio, which is 90% of the time. But if that person can't do an interview until 3 o'clock in the afternoon, I'm already home by then. I don't like the home equipment for that purpose. I want the studio equipment for that purpose. So that complicates it a little bit too. But I guess that's my answer. We haven't done it a ton just because for the pods that I listen to, if they have a guest on, I kind of get turned off by it. So I don't know if people feel that way or not. But that's my answer for Brett. We can look at it. If people want to hear more guests, we can do it. And then I have one last one I want to get to. This warmed my heart. So we had Mike in Sheboygan text in, or email in. And he said, John, been listening to you on the morning show for many years. You talk often about how much you go running. Now, I don't think we talk. I want to say, I talk about it, but I don't want to be a running guy. Anybody that runs or bikes or does, anybody that's committed to one kind of cardio and does it a lot, I want to avoid being the person that's all they talk about. All I talk about is how many miles I was on the bike this weekend or where I biked or how many miles I ran this weekend. I don't want that to be the topic. So anytime we bring it up on the air as a way to diffuse that, I always play this clip of Anchorman.
It's boring, but it's part of my life. I'm just going to grab this shirt if you don't mind.
So I was out for a run last night. It's boring, but it's my life. We always play that clip. So I try not to do that, but we do bring it up on the air. And recently, because of the marathon training, I have an 18-mile run tomorrow. Let's see how that goes. I'm trying to do the Green Bay Marathon in May. It is May 17th. It's a Sunday. I have done several half marathons, and we've done them now in training multiple times. I have never attempted the full marathon. The longest I've run in training is 15 miles, and then you still have to do 11 more. That's the one thing I keep coming back to with a marathon. Like 2 weeks ago, I did a 15-mile run on a Saturday. That's a pretty good chunk of time. I think it took me 2.5 hours or whatever it was. That's a lot of energy expended. I got done with that and felt very accomplished for about 10 seconds, and then I thought, I have to do 11 more. I have to do 11 more goddamn miles after this. How am I going to do that? So I've got an 18-mile run tomorrow. That'll be the new longest run, hopefully, unless I fall apart. That'll be the new longest run I've ever done in my life. I am attempting the Green Bay Marathon in May 17th. And I say attempting because I have no idea. I think I'll be able to do it. I'm going to go slow, but I don't know. I've never done it before. Hopefully it will be fine. But I do talk about it on the air. I do talk about going for a run once in a while, and I've been talking about it more with the marathon training. Mike said, I have been going for walks more routinely in the last year and have thought about maybe starting to get a jog in, yogging. Any advice for getting started? Mike said in Sheboygan. First of all, Mike, congratulations on just getting out there and getting those walks in. I cannot tell you, and I don't want to be douchey exercise guy here, but I'm going to be douchey exercise guy. I cannot tell you how good just to get out for a mile. You don't have to do anything crazy. Just get outside, you get out, and you walk a mile or you walk 2 miles or whatever. It doesn't have to be a fast pace, nothing like that. The impact that has on you physically and mentally is incredible. It really is. And I hate to be the bearer of bad news, but all of the douchey exercise people that have told you that I'm telling you right now I'm the guy, but other people have told you that, those gym teachers you hated, shout out Mr. Roddy. No, I didn't hate Mr. Roddy. Shout out Chuck. But the gym teachers that always tried to hit you over the head with that when you were in elementary school and middle school and high school, get out, get active, get a run in, play basketball, whatever. And they always preached how good it was for you physically and mentally, more physically than mentally at the time. But now I think we know the benefits on your mental health too. We know that way more. I regret to inform you that all of those douchey people who hit you over the head with that, they're right. They're right. I mean, it's true. The physical benefits and the mental benefits, and I get it. Not everybody has time. You're working 60 hours a week. Not you, but me. I'm working 35. You're working 60. I'm working a gentleman's 35, but I get it. You're working 60 hours a week. You got kids. You got crazy sports schedules. You got to put dinner together. You got to go to the grocery store. The water heater broke, whatever. There's a million things going on, and when somebody tells you, well, you should really get out for a walk once in a while, you almost want to blow your top. I get all of that, and those are all valid. I get all of that. But when you have time, I'm never somebody that says go do this every day because I know that's an almost impossible ask. And when you start it with that, I think you're setting yourself up for failure. I think when you start with an exercise routine, you say, I'm going to do this every day, and then inevitably, after 2 or 3 weeks, something comes up, and then you think, oh, God, I already blew it. And then another day goes, you don't do it. Another day goes, you don't do it, and you fall apart. I've done it many times. So I always just say, as much as you can, as often as you can, get outside and walk a mile. And it should take you 15 or 20 minutes to walk a mile, depending on what pace. I would recommend you to listen to this podcast. I would recommend to not listen to anything. I cannot tell you how good it is for your brain to get out, get in the sun, get some exercise, and not have music or not have a podcast going, just kind of in your own thoughts. You'll be amazed at the stuff that you can work out in your brain, the stresses, the anxieties, the things you're dealing with. You will be shocked at how much better you feel going for a 20-minute walk with no headphones in, no earbuds in, no AirPods in, listening to something else, and just letting your mind wander and take a look around at the trees and the nature and the sun, all that stuff. I would also recommend reading a chapter in a book every day. I would recommend a 1-mile walk and a 1-chapter read, 25 minutes a day. You'll be amazed at what that does for your brain and your anxiety levels and things like that, because that's where my story starts. So we'll run through this real quick. I have always been a gym guy, We got a free membership in Stevens Point, despite my appearances, despite the way I look. You've always been a gym guy? Yeah. Yeah, what? But we got a free gym membership. My cousin got me into it my senior year of high school. And he worked at Bally's at the time, and when I would go visit them in summer in Evanston, he would take me with him and kind of give me a tutorial about how to use the machines, how to use free weights, things like that. So then when I went to Point, the gym there was free, and we just got to use it. So I was there probably 3 or 4 times a week. I was never a cardio guy, though. I was always a lifting weights guy. I'd spend half an hour, 35 minutes doing that. Maybe I'd go on the bike for 5 minutes. Maybe I'd walk on the treadmill for 5 minutes, but that was it. Well, I kept on with that pretty much all the way through. I think the summer of 2016, I was just really in my head about a lot of stuff. I had anxiety that I couldn't really identify. I had some OCD stuff going on. And then my parents and some friends, and Lindsay will tell you, I had a really bad bout with insomnia, about a 2 or 3 month battle with pretty bad insomnia for that summer. And at some point, my wife just said, knowing I went to the gym, but mainly just kind of lifted weights, at some point, my wife just said, why don't you just go exhaust yourself? I mean, exhaust your body. Go for a run, go for a walk, whatever, and just go longer than normal and exhaust yourself. And that's kind of how I got started. So I went to the gym, and I can't tell you how simple I started. I walked on the treadmill for 3 minutes. I ran for 6 minutes to get me to the 9-minute mark. And then I walked for a minute, and that was it. And that's how I started. So, Mike, I would say I would start slow. That's what I did. I did that for probably a year, where that's about all I did. Walk for 3 minutes, a jog or a run for 6 minutes, walk for a minute, boom, 10 minutes. But at that time, that was way more cardio than I had ever done. And then I slowly, you push it a little bit. All right, let's see if I can go 15 minutes, 20 minutes. That was a huge barrier for me. About a year later, I said, let's try to run for 20 straight minutes. That is something I had never done in my life. And that was a challenge. And when I got past that, okay. And then I started doing things at the gym. And this is all at the gym, by the way. This is all on a treadmill. And then I started doing things where, the treadmill gyms have TVs. So I would get to the gym at 7 o'clock and I'd turn the Bucks game on or whatever, an NBA game. And I'd say, I'm going to watch this quarter, 1 quarter of NBA basketball. I'm not going to look at the calories burned. I'm not going to look at the time. I am just going to run for however long this quarter goes with commercials. I'm just going to watch this quarter of basketball. And that got me to about 30 minutes or 35 minutes, given how things went. And that built and built and built. And then eventually I would get to a point where I was running for an hour every day on the treadmill. Then the pandemic hit and gyms shut down. And then my life changed for the better because I got to run outside. I had never really run outside. I've done a few 5Ks. That was it. That was my experience with running outside. So the gyms all shut down in the spring of 2020. And I have to run outside. And within 2 or 3 runs of doing that, whatever week that was in March of 2020, I thought, why have I been running on a treadmill? This is so much better than running on a treadmill. You look at things, the time goes by. And yes, I do listen to music and I do listen to podcasts from time to time. Sometimes I don't, and that's probably better for me, like I just said. But that was a game changer for me. And it just improved my physical health, my mental health. Recreational drugs, by the way, do the same thing. So if you don't want to do any of this, if you don't want to do any of the exercise I'm advocating for, you can also just get like a 25 milligram CBD drink or whatever, or a gummy, and it does the same thing. But running outside was such a game changer, and it's so much more enjoyable. I don't know. Now, I run on the treadmill if it's bad outside, snowstorm, rain, whatever. But I try not to. And we've got a nice treadmill now, but I try not to. If I can run outside, I'll run outside. So that kind of changed my life, running outside the pandemic year of 2020. Now, since then, I've done, like I said, a half marathon in Madison, and I've done some half marathons in training now for this marathon. But that's how I got started. I was kind of battling things inside of my head. And the exercise, the cardio, taking my mind off of something, that really did help, tiring my body out. That did help with all of that stuff, which was, a decade ago. And now we'll see. We'll see if I can do the Green Bay Marathon. But that would be my advice. Another good piece of advice I got as I was running outside for the first year, after curling one night, one of the guys that I curled against, I knew he was a marathoner. And he had done many marathons. And he was probably 10 years older than me. And he's still alive. He is 10 years older than me. He's not dead. And he ran a marathon and died. No, he didn't. But I remember talking to him after curling one night, and I said, hey, I'm running 5 or 6 miles a day, about an hour, 5 or 6, or a little better than 6 miles a day. And even though I feel like that's good, at that time, I couldn't fathom doing a half marathon. I couldn't fathom doing a marathon. I said, how do you do that? I can't imagine. I think I was talking within the context of a half marathon. I said, I'm running 6 miles a day. I can't imagine doing that again in the same run. And he said, well, what are you trying to do? Are you going for speed? Are you trying to find a certain time? I said, no, not really. I just like to try to run further. And he said to me, what are you running a mile time? And at that time, I think I was running about an 8-minute mile, which isn't bad. It's not good, but it's not bad. And I was fairly fast for me. And he said, the next time you go for a run, barely get above walking. It's going to feel weird. You're going to be going slow. You're going to feel like you look awkward. Go for a run where you are barely better paced than walking and see how far you can go. And a week or two later, I did that. And you can run so much farther. I mean, you're not going as fast, or your heart rate's not getting up there as fast. And if you can just zone out or distract yourself or enjoy it, if you can enjoy it, if you can go slow, so I went to about a 10.5 or an 11-minute pace, yeah, you can run then for 9 or 10 miles. And then that's eventually how I ran the half marathon. And that's what I'm going to have to do for the marathon. I think the marathon's going to take me about 5 hours. But that's what I'll be doing in the middle of May in Green Bay. But that was good advice, too, for running outside. Just go slow. You're going to feel weird because you want to run fast. You want to get done. You want to get done with your run. But if you just go slow and you take that part of it out, and that's the pace you're setting, you can go far. You'll be surprised at how far you can go. But that is from Mike. I want updates, Mike. If you try this, I want updates. But I would say for the first year, I was barely going 10 minutes, and then I slowly built up from there. So small goals. I would say very small goals. I appreciate that email from Mike. All right, that'll do it for us here. Now, this is an episode. Holy cow. This is like a Rogan episode. Not really. We'd have to go double this. It's like the half marathon to the marathon. We'd have to double this to do a Rogan episode. Have a happy, safe Easter weekend. We will be back after it on Monday. We'll recap the Brewer weekend. We'll set up the Final Four. By the way, I've got UConn and Michigan. That's my championship game on Monday. We'll be setting up the championship game on Monday. I think UConn over Illinois and Michigan over Arizona. I think that Michigan-Arizona game is kind of the de facto national championship game. I think the winner of that is going to win it. But I've got Michigan and UConn in the national title game coming up on Monday. Well, we'll break that down on Monday. Have a happy, safe Easter weekend. We'll chat with you then.